I'm Sarah, 28, and I thought I knew what family meant until my wedding day arrived. Standing alone in my white dress, staring at empty chairs where my parents should have been sitting, I realized everything I believed about blood loyalty was a lie. They chose my golden child brother's last-minute golf tournament over the most important day of my life. That moment of abandonment would spark a chain of events that would ultimately expose the ugly truth about favoritism, destroy their perfect image, and serve them the coldest revenge they never saw coming. But before I tell you how I made them pay for 28 years of neglect, I need to know, where are you watching from? If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, hit that like button because this story is going to get intense. And trust me, you'll want to subscribe and turn on notifications because what happened next will blow your mind. The way karma came for my parents. Let's just say justice has never tasted so sweet. Growing up as the second child in the Martinez household meant living in perpetual shadow. My brother Jake was 18 months older, and from the moment I could form memories, I understood that he was the sun around which our family orbited. When Jake scored his first goal in Little League, Dad threw him a celebration party. When I won the state spelling bee at age 10, Mom made his favorite dinner because Jake had a hard practice today. The pattern was established early and never wavered. Jake got the new bike while I inherited his hand-me-down. Jake got piano lessons, art classes, and summer camps. I got told we couldn't afford extras for both kids. When report cards came home, Jake's B's were celebrated with ice cream trips while my straight A's earned a casual good job without looking up from their phones. College applications revealed the true depth of their favoritism. Jake applied to expensive private schools, and suddenly my parents discovered a college fund they'd been building for the kids. When I asked about my share, Dad shifted uncomfortably and explained that Jake's engineering degree would cost more, and there wasn't much left over. Community college is a smart financial choice, Mom added, as if I should be grateful for their practical wisdom. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through state school, watching from afar as Jake partied through his expensive private education, changing majors 4 times, while my parents cheerfully funded his journey of self-discovery. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in digital marketing. Jake barely scraped through with a 2.3 gigapascals in communications. Guess who got the job at Dad's construction company? Meeting David changed everything. He was a software engineer I met at a young professionals networking event, and for the first time in my life, someone saw my worth. We bonded over late-night conversations about entrepreneurship and dreams bigger than our current circumstances. David came from a tight-knit family who welcomed me with open arms, treating me like the daughter they'd always wanted. When David proposed after 2 years of dating, I was floating on cloud 9. Finally, I would have a family that chose me first. The engagement party at his parents' house was magical. His relatives asked about wedding plans, offered help with planning, and genuinely celebrated our love. I felt like Cinderella finally getting her happy ending. Planning the wedding became my passion project. I dreamed of this day since childhood, imagining walking down the aisle with Dad, having Mom help me into my dress, seeing their proud faces in the front row. I sent save the dates 8 months in advance, chose a date that worked around everyone's schedules, and even moved the ceremony an hour later to accommodate Dad's work schedule. The venue was perfect, a charming garden estate with string lights and blooming roses. I'd saved for 2 years to afford the photographer I wanted, the one who captured emotions in every shot. My dress was a simple but elegant A-line that made me feel like a princess. I'd planned every detail with military precision, from the handwritten place cards to the playlist that included songs that reminded me of family memories. 3 weeks before the wedding, Jake announced he'd been selected for a golf tournament in Phoenix. Not the Masters or PGA Tour, a regional amateur tournament with a modest prize pool. But it was the same weekend as my wedding. I waited for someone to tell him he'd have to miss it. Instead, I watched in horror as my parents began discussing how they could support both kids. The conversation that followed shattered something fundamental inside me. Mom suggested I move the wedding date. Dad wondered if the tournament might lead to sponsorship opportunities for Jake, When I pointed out that my wedding date had been set for months, with deposits paid and guests traveling from across the country, Mom said, "Weddings happen all the time, honey. This tournament could change Jake's life." The final blow came 2 days later. Jake called to inform me that our parents had decided to attend his tournament instead of my wedding. "They can come to your next one," he joked, apparently unaware that his casual cruelty had just severed something that could never be repaired. "Besides, Sarah, it's not like you don't have David's family there. I need the support more." That night I sat on my bathroom floor and cried harder than I had since childhood. David found me there at 2 a.m. mascara streaked down my face, clutching my phone after a useless call, where Mom explained that they'd already paid for Jake's tournament entry fees and hotel reservations. "We'll make it up to you," she promised, the same empty words I'd heard my entire life. The morning of my wedding, I woke up with crystal clarity. I was done begging for crumbs of affection from people who saw me as an afterthought. As I got ready in the bridal suite surrounded by David's sisters and my college friends, I made a decision that would change everything. If my parents wanted to choose Jake over me one final time, they would live with the consequences forever. Walking down that aisle without Dad, I felt both heartbroken and liberated. David's father stepped in to give me away, his eyes filled with the pride my own father should have felt. The ceremony was beautiful, intimate, and filled with people who truly wanted to be there. The empty chairs in the front row served as a powerful reminder that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. As I danced with my new husband under the stars, I whispered a promise to myself. My parents had made their choice crystal clear. Now I would make mine. They wanted Jake to be their only child, perfect. From this moment forward, they would get exactly what they wished for. The honeymoon in Tuscany was therapeutic in ways I hadn't expected. Away from the familiar ache of family disappointment, I could finally see my situation with clarity. David and I spent long evenings on our hotel balcony, planning not just our future together but my future, as an independent woman who would never again beg for approval from people who didn't value her. "You know what I keep thinking about," I told David as we shared gelato in a small piazza. "I've spent 28 years trying to prove I'm worthy of love I was never going to receive. What if I put that same energy into proving something else entirely?" David understood immediately. He'd watched me excel at everything I touched, from academic achievements to the marketing campaigns I created at my current job. "You're talking about starting your own business," he said, and I could see the excitement building in his eyes. "Sarah, you've been ready for this for years. You just needed to stop looking backwards." We returned from Italy with a business plan sketched on hotel stationery and a shared bank account that we immediately began filling with startup funds. David's software engineering salary was comfortable enough to support us while I built my digital marketing consultancy from the ground up. I gave my employer 4 weeks' notice and set up a home office in our spare bedroom. The first year was brutal in the best possible way. I worked 16-hour days, taking on any client who would give me a chance. Small restaurants, local gyms, boutique shops. I treated every project like it was for Fortune 500 company. My attention to detail and genuine investment in each client's success began creating a ripple effect through word-of-mouth referrals. My breakthrough came when I landed a contract with a struggling organic food company. Their sales had been declining for months, despite having superior products. I dove deep into market research, competitor analysis, and consumer behavior patterns. The campaign I created didn't just increase their sales, it tripled their revenue within 6 months and attracted the attention of major grocery chains. That success story became my calling card. Within 18 months, I had a waiting list of potential clients and had hired my first 2 employees, both brilliant women who'd been overlooked by traditional agencies. We worked out of a small but sleek downtown office space, and I made sure to treat my team the way I'd always wanted to be treated, with respect, recognition, and genuine appreciation for their contributions. The growth was exponential. By year 3, Martinez Digital Solutions employed 15 people and was handling marketing for mid-sized corporations across 3 states. I'd been featured in several business publications as a 30 under 30 entrepreneur to watch. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd taken my father's surname for my company name, the same surname he'd been so eager to pass on to Jake through the family business. David and I moved into a stunning contemporary home with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. I drove a silver BMW that I'd paid for entirely with my own earnings. More importantly, I was building something meaningful, creating jobs, helping businesses succeed, and proving that success wasn't about who believed in you, but about how much you believed in yourself. During this period of growth, I maintained complete radio silence with my family. I blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, and instructed David to do the same. When old family friends reached out occasionally asking why I disappeared, I simply said I was focusing on my career and left it at that. I didn't badmouth my parents or Jake. I just erased them from my narrative entirely. The silence was initially difficult for David, who came from a family that talked every day. But he watched me flourish in ways he'd never seen before, watched me become confident and decisive without the constant background noise of disapproval and neglect. "You're like a completely different person," he told me one evening as I celebrated landing a particularly prestigious client. "You're the person you were always meant to be." My success began attracting attention beyond business circles. The local newspaper ran a feature story about my company's rapid growth and community impact. A regional magazine included me in their annual Power Players issue. I was invited to speak at entrepreneurship conferences and women's business leadership events. Each accolade felt like vindication for every time my parents had dismissed my potential. Every awards ceremony they weren't invited to, every milestone they didn't witness, every moment of pride they couldn't claim. It all felt like justice being served, one achievement at a time. The psychological freedom was intoxicating. Without the constant weight of trying to earn love that was never coming, I discovered talents and confidence I'd never known I possessed. I negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts with the same energy I'd once spent begging for basic acknowledgement. I hired and mentored young professionals with the enthusiasm my parents had reserved exclusively for Jake's endeavors. Year 4 brought international expansion opportunities and acquisition offers from larger agencies. I turned them all down, preferring to maintain control and continue building something uniquely mine. My team had grown to 30 employees, including several who'd left prestigious firms to work for me because of our company culture and growth trajectory. The personal satisfaction was immense, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that imagined my parents seeing my success and feeling some combination of regret and pride. I pictured them discovering my achievements through mutual acquaintances and realizing what they'd lost when they chose Jake's amateur golf tournament over my wedding day. But as months turned into years, I heard nothing. No attempts at contact, no acknowledgement of my success, no indication that they even knew or cared about what I'd built. The silence confirmed what I'd suspected all along. I truly had been erased from their consideration as easily as they'd skipped my wedding. What I didn't know was that my success hadn't gone unnoticed. While I was building my empire and healing from their neglect, my parents were beginning to realize the magnitude of their mistake. But their eventual attempt at reconciliation would come with strings attached that would trigger the final act of this family drama. It was a Tuesday morning in late September, when the carefully constructed walls I'd built around my family began to crack. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office, the autumn sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, when my assistant knocked on my door with an expression I'd never seen before. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you," Emma said hesitantly. "She says she's your mother, but she's not on the appointment schedule, and I know you have strict policies about unscheduled visitors." The coffee mug in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. For 4 years, I had lived in a world where my parents simply didn't exist. They had made their choice on my wedding day, and I had made mine in response. The idea that my mother was standing in my company's reception area felt surreal, like something from a fever dream. "Tell her I'm in meetings all day," I said automatically, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew this moment was inevitable. You can't build the kind of success I'd achieved without it eventually reaching the people you've cut out of your life, especially in a city where mutual connections were bound to exist. Emma shifted uncomfortably. She said she'll wait. She's been sitting out there for over an hour and she seems determined. I think this is where a lot of people watching might be feeling that familiar knot in their stomach. You know that feeling when the family that hurt you suddenly shows up wanting something. If you've ever had to decide whether to face the people who abandoned you when you needed them most, drop a comment below, because this next part is going to test every boundary I thought I'd built. Through my office window I could see the reception area and there she was. Mom looked older, smaller, somehow wearing the same type of floral dress she'd favored my entire childhood. She was clutching a manila envelope and checking her watch repeatedly. The sight of her triggered a flood of complicated emotions I thought I'd processed years ago. Against my better judgment, I found myself walking toward the reception area. The moment she saw me, her face lit up with a smile that seemed both genuine and calculated, the expression I remembered from childhood when she wanted something from Dad but was pretending it was casual conversation. "Sarah, oh honey, you look incredible," she gushed, standing up so quickly she nearly knocked over her purse. "I mean, I knew you were doing well, but seeing you here in this beautiful office, I'm so proud of you." The audacity was breathtaking. 4 years of complete silence, and she opened with pride she had no right to claim. I gestured toward a small conference room away from my employees' curious glances, maintaining the professional demeanor that had served me well in countless difficult business negotiations. "What do you want?" I asked once the door was closed, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Mom's composure faltered slightly. She set the manila envelope on the conference table and launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech about how much they'd missed me, how many times they'd thought about calling, how proud Dad was when he heard about my business success through a mutual friend at the hardware store. "We made mistakes, sweetheart. We know that now. Your father and we've talked about this so many times, and we realize we didn't handle things well when you were growing up, but we want to make it right." I waited for her to continue, curious about what making it right meant to people who had spent nearly 3 decades proving I was their afterthought. The envelope, it turned out, contained newspaper clippings. Articles about my business, photos from the magazine, features, even a printed screenshot from my company's website. They had been keeping track of my success, collecting evidence of my achievements, like trophies they had no role in earning. "We kept every article," Mom said, her voice taking on the tone she'd always used when she thought she was being particularly generous. "Dad has them on his office wall at the company. He shows them to everyone who comes in. That's my daughter," he tells them. "She built that business from nothing." The rage that surged through me was white-hot and immediate. They had been showing off my success to strangers while maintaining complete silence with me. They were claiming pride in achievements they had not only failed to support, but had actively undermined through years of neglect and favoritism. "Where were you when I was building all of this?" I asked, my voice still steady but with an edge that made Mom shift uncomfortably in her chair. "Where were you when I was working 3 jobs to pay for college? Where were you when I was starting my business from our spare bedroom? Where were you on my wedding day?" "That's exactly what we want to talk about," Mom said quickly, reaching into her purse for a tissue she didn't seem to need. "We know we hurt you, and we want to make amends. We're hoping you might consider letting us back into your life. Maybe we could have dinner this weekend, you could bring David and we could all start fresh." But then came the real reason for her visit, delivered with the same casual tone she might use to ask me to pick up groceries. "Actually, there's something else we wanted to discuss. Jake's been having some challenges lately. The golf thing didn't work out the way he hoped, and he's been struggling to find steady work. Your father's business has been slow and we've had to cut back on some things. We were wondering if maybe you might have a position at your company for your brother. Family, helping family, you know." The pieces clicked into place with stunning clarity. This wasn't about reconciliation or regret, or making amends for years of favoritism. This was about Jake needing a job and my parents realizing that the daughter they'd ignored had become their most successful resource. They hadn't come to apologize for missing my wedding, or for 28 years of treating me like a consolation prize. They had come to ask me to rescue the golden child who had apparently tarnished beyond their ability to polish. I leaned back in my chair, studying my mother's face as she waited for my response. She looked hopeful, confident, even as if she genuinely believed that blood relation would trump years of abandonment and neglect. As if she thought I would be grateful for the opportunity to prove my worth by solving Jake's problems. "Tell me about the golf tournament," I said finally. "The one that was so important you missed your daughter's wedding. How did that work out for Jake?" Mom's smile faltered completely. The tournament, it turned out, had been a disaster. Jake had finished in the bottom third of the field, winning nothing except the satisfaction of knowing his parents had chosen his failure over my happiness. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, but I had heard everything I needed to know. They wanted me to clean up the mess their favoritism had created, to be the solution to problems that existed because they had spent decades investing in the wrong child. As I walked Mom back to the reception area, I made a decision that would set the final act of this family drama into motion. After Mom left my office, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel as I processed what had just happened. The audacity of their request was staggering, but more than that, it was revealing. They hadn't changed at all. I was still just a resource to be utilized when convenient, a backup plan for when their primary investment failed to pay dividends. That evening, David found me pacing in our kitchen, my mind racing with possibilities. I told him about Mom's visit, about their request for me to hire Jake, about the manila envelope full of achievements they'd been collecting like trading cards. "They want you to save him," David said, understanding immediately. "After everything they put you through, they want you to be Jake's safety net." "It's worse than that," I replied, pouring myself a glass of wine with hands that weren't quite steady. "They think this is normal. They genuinely believe that family loyalty flows only one direction, toward Jake. They missed my wedding for his failed golf tournament, and now they expect me to give him a job to fix their mistake." But as I talked it through with David, a plan began forming in my mind. For 4 years, I had simply erased my parents from my life, which had been therapeutic but ultimately passive. What if, instead of just saying no, I used this opportunity to teach them a lesson they would never forget? "I'm going to help Jake," I announced, watching David's eyebrows shoot up in surprise. "But not the way they're expecting." Over the next few days, I crafted my response carefully. I called Mom and scheduled a family dinner for the following Saturday. I chose the most expensive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where entrees started at $50 and the wine list read like a mortgage payment. If they wanted to discuss family business, we would do it in a setting that reflected my current status, not the shabby diner where they used to take us for special occasions when I was growing up. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, wearing a tailored black dress and the diamond earrings David had given me for our anniversary. I wanted to look successful, confident, and completely in control. When my parents and Jake arrived, I watched their faces take in the opulent surroundings with expressions that ranged from impressed to intimidated. Jake looked exactly like what he was, a 30-year-old man who had never learned to struggle. His golf shirt was expensive but wrinkled, his handshake was weak, and his eyes held the slightly desperate quality of someone who had always expected things to work out without effort. Mom and Dad flanked him like bodyguards, ready to smooth over any awkwardness and advocate for their precious investment. "Sarah, this place is incredible," Mom said, clearly nervous as she examined the menu. "Are you sure about the prices here? We could have gone somewhere more casual." "I'm sure," I replied smoothly, signaling the sommelier. "I thought we should celebrate Jake's new opportunity properly." The dinner conversation was a masterclass in dysfunction disguised as family bonding. Dad talked about his construction business like it was a temporary setback rather than a decades-long pattern of poor decisions. Mom mentioned how excited they were that the family was coming back together. Jake mostly stared at his phone until Mom elbowed him to participate in the conversation. "So, tell me about this job you want at my company," I said to Jake as we waited for dessert. What exactly do you think you're qualified to do? Jake launched into a rambling explanation about his people skills and his fresh perspective and how he had always been interested in marketing. It became painfully obvious that he had no understanding of what my company actually did, no relevant experience, and no genuine interest in learning. He just needed a paycheck and assumed I would provide one because we shared DNA. I've given this a lot of thought, I said, finally pulling out my phone to show them something I'd prepared. And I think I have the perfect position for Jake. Their faces lit up with relief and gratitude. Finally, the successful daughter was going to solve their problems and restore their faith in family loyalty. Dad even reached across the table to squeeze my hand, the first physical affection he'd shown me since childhood. There's a company in Seattle that's looking for entry-level marketing assistants. I continued watching their expressions change as they processed the word Seattle. The starting salary is $35,000 a year, which is actually quite good for someone with no experience. The cost of living is higher there, but I'm sure Jake can make it work. Seattle, Mom repeated, as if I'd suggested Jake move to Mars. But that's so far away. Can't you find something local? Unfortunately, I don't have any entry-level positions available at my company, I said, my voice professionally pleasant. All of our current openings require at least 5 years of relevant experience and advanced certifications. But this Seattle opportunity is perfect for someone just starting out. Jake's face had gone pale. I can't move to Seattle. I don't know anyone there, and I've never lived anywhere but here. Well, that's unfortunate, I said, signaling for the check, because that's the only help I can offer. You see, my company has very strict hiring standards. We only employ people who have proven themselves capable of excellence, who understand that success requires sacrifice, and who have demonstrated loyalty to the people who believe in them. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscles working. Mom looked like she was trying to solve a complex math problem. Jake stared at me with the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him all evening: panic. You're being unreasonable, Dad said finally, his voice carrying the same tone he'd used when I was 12 and had dared to ask why Jake got a bigger allowance. Family helps family, that's how it works. You're absolutely right, I agreed, pulling out my credit card as the server approached with the check. Family does help family. The question is, where was my family when I needed help? Where was my family on my wedding day? Where was my family when I was building this business from nothing? I stood up, smoothing my dress and gathering my purse. I've spent 28 years learning what family loyalty means to this family. Tonight I'm returning the favor. The week following our restaurant confrontation was silent on their end, but I could feel the storm building. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard whispers that my parents were telling anyone who would listen that I had changed and become cold since my success. The narrative they were crafting painted them as loving parents trying to reconnect with a daughter who had been corrupted by wealth and ambition. What they didn't realize was that their version of events was about to be challenged in the most public way possible. I had been invited to speak at the annual Women in Business Conference, a prestigious event that drew hundreds of attendees, including many prominent figures from our business community. The topic of my keynote was building success without traditional support systems. I didn't tell my parents about the speaking engagement, but in a city our size, word travels fast. The local business journal ran a preview article about the event featuring a photo of me and a brief bio that mentioned my company's remarkable growth trajectory. It was exactly the kind of recognition they had been claiming credit for to their friends and acquaintances. The morning of the conference, I received a text from Mom. Saw the article about your speech today. Dad and I are so proud. Can we come watch? The audacity was breathtaking but also perfectly predictable. They wanted to show up and bask in reflected glory, to be seen as the supportive parents of the successful keynote speaker. They wanted to claim ownership of achievements they had actively hindered to rewrite history in real time. I texted back, "It's open to the public. Tickets are $150 each." 2 hours later, Mom responded, "That seems expensive for a speech. Can you get us guest passes?" I didn't reply. The conference center was packed when I arrived for my afternoon keynote. I had spent weeks crafting this speech knowing it would be recorded and potentially viewed by thousands online. But as I stood backstage adjusting my microphone and reviewing my notes one final time, I spotted them in the third row. Mom, Dad, and Jake all wearing their best clothes and looking around with expressions of nervous pride. They had paid the admission fee, probably grumbling about the cost but unwilling to miss this opportunity to be associated with my success. Seeing them there, ready to claim credit for a journey they had actively obstructed, crystallized my resolve for what I was about to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I began stepping up to the podium with complete confidence. I want to talk to you today about building success when the people who should support you most decide you're not worth their investment. The audience was immediately engaged, leaning forward in their seats. Public speaking had become one of my strengths over the past few years, and I could feel the energy in the room responding to my presence. 5 years ago, I stood alone on what should have been the happiest day of my life, my wedding day. The two people who should have been proudest to see me marry the man of my dreams had made a different choice. They decided that my brother's amateur golf tournament was more important than their daughter's wedding. I could see Mom's face go white from the stage. Dad was staring at his hands. Jake looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Around them, hundreds of strangers were hanging on every word, beginning to understand that this wasn't going to be a typical business success story. That moment taught me something invaluable about the difference between biological family and chosen family. It taught me that some people will only see your worth when it becomes profitable for them to acknowledge it. And it taught me that real success means building something so substantial that their approval becomes irrelevant. I shared the story of my childhood, the pattern of favoritism, the years of being treated as an afterthought. I talked about working 3 jobs through college while my brother's education was fully funded. I described the moment I decided to cut contact entirely and how that decision had freed me to become the person I was always meant to be. The audience was captivated, but more than that, they were relating. I could see heads nodding throughout the room, people recognizing their own stories in mine. When I described my parents' recent attempt to reconnect, specifically to ask me to hire my underqualified brother, several people actually gasped audibly. Last week, these same parents who missed my wedding to support my brother's failed golf tournament came to my office with a request. They wanted me to give my brother a job at the company I built without their help. They collected newspaper clippings of my achievements like trophies, showing them off to friends while maintaining complete silence with me. They wanted me to solve the problems their favoritism had created. I paused, letting the weight of that hypocrisy settle over the audience. In the third row, my parents looked like they were experiencing a public execution, which in a way they were. I want to address something directly, I continued, looking straight at them. To the people in this audience who might be wondering if they should give family members unlimited chances to hurt them in the name of blood loyalty, let me be clear. Family is not about DNA. Family is about choice, consistency, and genuine care. Family shows up when it matters, not just when they need something from you. The applause was thunderous. As I wrapped up my speech with practical advice about building support networks and finding mentors outside traditional family structures, I watched my parents gathering their things and heading for the exit. They couldn't escape fast enough, but the damage was already done. The video of my keynote went viral within hours. Local news stations picked up the story, framing it as a powerful message about overcoming family dysfunction. Business publications wrote follow-up articles about the importance of chosen family in entrepreneurial success. My company's phone rang non-stop with new client inquiries and partnership opportunities, but the most satisfying response came from unexpected sources. Over the next few days, I received dozens of emails from conference attendees sharing their own stories of family favoritism and neglect. People thanked me for giving them permission to set boundaries with toxic relatives. Several mentioned that my speech had inspired them to cut contact with family members who only showed interest when they needed financial help. The speech had accomplished something I never expected. It had given other people the courage to prioritize their own well-being over dysfunctional family loyalty. In trying to expose my parents' hypocrisy, I had accidentally started a much larger conversation about the difference between healthy and toxic family relationships. But my parents weren't finished. Their next move would force me to implement the final phase of my revenge. The backlash from my keynote speech was swift and predictable. Within 48 hours, I started receiving messages from extended family members, family friends, and even some of my parents' neighbors. The narrative they were spreading was that I had humiliated them publicly, that I was an ungrateful daughter who had aired dirty laundry for personal gain. Jake sent me a particularly venomous text calling me a selfish bitch who had destroyed his reputation and making it impossible for him to find work locally since everyone now knew about his failed golf tournament and employment struggles. Mom left tearful voicemails about how I had broken their hearts and betrayed family trust. Dad predictably said nothing directly but had apparently told several people that he didn't raise me to be vindictive. The irony was delicious. After 28 years of emotional neglect and favoritism, they were upset that I had finally told the truth about our family dynamics. They were angry that their carefully constructed public image as loving, supportive parents had been shattered by the simple act of honesty. But their real mistake was what happened next. Instead of reflecting on their behavior or attempting genuine reconciliation, they decided to go nuclear. Through a mutual friend, I learned that they were planning to show up at my office building with a local reporter, claiming that I had fabricated stories about them for publicity and that my success had gone to my head. They were actually planning to publicly accuse me of lying about my own childhood experiences to a journalist, apparently believing that their version of events would be more credible than mine. The sheer audacity was breathtaking, but it also handed me the perfect opportunity for the final act of this drama. I spent the weekend preparing for their arrival, gathering evidence I had never thought I would need. Old report cards that showed the disparity in how our achievements were treated. Photos from family events where Jake was clearly the focus while I lingered in the background. Financial records from college that proved I had received no parental support while Jake's education was fully funded. Most importantly, I still had the wedding invitation they had received along with text messages from that period showing their decision-making process. I had saved everything not out of spite but because I'm naturally organized and tend to keep important documents. Monday morning arrived, and sure enough, they appeared in my office building lobby with a young reporter from the local newspaper. I watched from my office window as they gestured dramatically, no doubt spinning their version of events where they were the victims of an ungrateful daughter's public betrayal. I walked down to the lobby with a file folder in my hand, wearing my most professional smile. The reporter looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing that she had been dragged into a family dispute that was more complex than my parents had portrayed. "I understand you have some questions about my keynote speech," I said directly to the journalist, ignoring my parents entirely. "I'd be happy to provide clarification along with documentation to support everything I shared." What followed was the most satisfying 15 minutes of my adult life. I methodically presented evidence of every claim I had made in my speech. The wedding invitation with their RSVP declining to attend Jake's tournament, text messages showing their reasoning, college financial records proving the disparity in support, report cards and awards from childhood that had been dismissed or ignored. The reporter's expression shifted from skeptical to fascinated to horrified as she reviewed the documentation. My parents watched their narrative crumble in real time, their faces cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally defeat. "Is there anything else you'd like to add about your daughter's character or her business practices?" the reporter asked my parents, her tone making it clear that she now understood who the real story was. Dad cleared his throat. "We just want our family back together," he said weakly, the fight gone out of him. "That's interesting," I replied, opening the file folder one more time. "Because I have text messages from last week where Jake called me a selfish bitch for telling the truth about our family dynamics. I have voicemails from Mom accusing me of betraying family trust by sharing my own experiences. And I have reports from multiple sources that you've been telling people I fabricated my childhood for publicity." I looked at each of them directly for the first time since my wedding day. You had 28 years to want your family back together. You had my entire childhood to treat me like I mattered. You had my wedding day to show me that I was important to you. You chose differently every single time. The reporter was scribbling notes furiously. I could practically see the headline forming in her mind. Local business owner provides documentation of family favoritism claims. If you want to rebuild a relationship with me, I continued, it would require genuine accountability, real change, and acknowledgement of the harm you caused. It would require treating me as an equal to Jake, instead of as a backup plan. It would require proving over time that you've learned from your mistakes. I paused, letting that possibility hang in the air for a moment. But based on your behavior over the past 2 weeks, trying to use my success for your benefit, getting angry when I told the truth and now attempting to publicly discredit me, it's clear that you haven't learned anything at all. You're still the same people who missed their daughter's wedding for an amateur golf tournament. The newspaper article that ran the following week was devastating for them. The reporter had done her homework interviewing conference attendees, verifying my documentation, and even reaching out to David's family for their perspective on our wedding day. The headline read, "Success Story Sparks Conversation About Family Favoritism and Chosen Family." But the real victory wasn't the public vindication. It was the peace I felt afterward. For 30 years I had carried the weight of wondering if I was the problem, if I wasn't worthy of their love, if I should try harder to earn their approval. The keynote speech and its aftermath had finally closed that chapter forever. My business continued to thrive, boosted by the attention from people who respected my courage in speaking truth about family dysfunction. David and I started talking seriously about having children of our own, excited about the opportunity to create the kind of loving, supportive family environment we had both experienced with his parents. The best part, I never heard from my parents again. They got exactly what they had always given me: silence. And for the first time in my life, that silence felt like victory instead of abandonment. Looking back, I realized that their abandonment was actually the greatest gift they ever gave me. It forced me to become completely self-reliant, to build my own definition of family, and to create success on my own terms. I learned that the people who truly matter will show up when it counts, and the people who don't show up simply don't matter. To anyone watching this who has ever felt like the forgotten child, the overlooked sibling, or the family member who gives more than they receive, let me ask you this: have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Have you experienced the kind of favoritism that makes you question your own worth? And most importantly, have you found the courage to walk away from people who only value you when they need something? I want to hear your stories in the comments below. Share your experiences with family dynamics that mirror mine, or tell me about the moment you realized that blood doesn't automatically make someone family. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar decisions. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps other people find these conversations about difficult family relationships. And definitely subscribe with notifications on, because I'll be sharing more stories about setting boundaries, building chosen family, and thriving after cutting toxic people out of your life. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being over dysfunctional family loyalty. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to love you back. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, family is about choice, not chance. Choose people who choose you back, and never apologize for protecting your peace. Here's to building the life and family you deserve, with or without the approval of people who never saw your worth.